of the Center for Nonprofit Leadership. And we are very, very grateful to Visionality and the team for joining us today, and not just today. I think the tee up to this particular webinar was a very desperate phone call to Emily, made by me, with the request to please help us. Please help us. I can't do our work and learn Zoom technology and how to digitize our own strategies all at the same time. And can you all pull alongside us, given our deep and abiding commitment to strengthening nonprofits serving our region. And that really was the seeds for today's session. I think Visionality was very gracious, not just in sharing their time, but their expertise with us and so many other nonprofit organizations. So today we're gonna have a conversation with Christiana Almeida and Emily Barony about thinking through how to digitize your mission. We're going to invite you to pose questions and answers using the chat box. Our wonderful Brianne is behind the scenes, so if you run into any technical difficulties, you can go ahead and use the Q&A with her, asking any questions about the Zoom technology that we're using today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Emily and Christiana, our presenters, and take it away, ladies.
Thanks, Dina. So Emily and I work at Visionality. We are based out of Ventura County, but we help nonprofits in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties basically succeed in new ways. And it has been such an interesting, fast partnership. We've been working with the Center for Nonprofit Leadership here and there on and off for the past couple of years. But with the way that the world has been changing, we have just found that we need to be able, as an organization, to collaborate more and more to fulfill our missions, and to find other opportunities for us to partner with similar organizations so that we're not spinning our wheels in so many directions. And so I know that we have been so grateful for the partnership with Dina and everybody at the Center for Nonprofit Leadership, as well as other organizations across Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. Because at the end of the day, our goal, our collective goal, is to help organizations succeed, and we're finding new ways to do that today and every single day. So first and foremost, I would really like to thank you all for taking the time out of your day, out of your week, out of God knows what day it is anymore, to spend an hour, maybe a little bit more with us today to learn about how to digitize your mission, but also how to digitize your teams as well. Because I'm pretty sure for probably 80% of the nonprofits that might be on this call today, this might be the first time that you guys have figured out how to work from home. And so Visionality has been doing this for over 8 years. We've been a completely remote team the entire time our company has been in existence. And so we have a few tricks up our sleeve on how to do that. We will share some of that with you today. But then the second half of our presentation, we'll be sharing how to actually turn your mission into the digital space. And so I kind of just wanted to open up with slightly lighthearted feeling that we don't know what day it is anymore. We don't really know how long this is going to last. We don't know how long we're going to be here. The world feels like it's devolving into chaos because we're all here in our jammies every single day. The dogs are wondering why they can't go for walks all the time because we're home. Children need attention, and then more attention, and then homeschooling, and then grocery shopping, and the world's just changed. Nothing is normal. And I think we all just need to take a step back and recognize that. So the way that we ran our teams before and the way that we fulfilled our missions before also has to change. And I'm not trying to pontificate that in any sort of like large way, but I think that we're also finding with a lot of people generally, we're in week 3 of this now, and people are starting to experience a level of burnout that they probably weren't experiencing before. You know, I was comparing this actually to a very traditional disaster response. Emily and I both have very extensive experience in the disaster industry. And then prior to a disaster, you kind of see the huge grocery store runs. It's usually not toilet paper, it's bread and milk. And then you start to get into this hero phase. And I think we're just kind of on the outer edge of that hero phase where people are going to start to have this, okay, I'm ready for this to be over moment. And I think that we're about to hit that next, because some people have been doing this for a week, some people have been doing this for 3 to 4 weeks now. And knowing that California itself has at least another 3 to 4 weeks ahead of it. And that's kind of the conservative side. So we need to be willing to do this for at least 4, 8, possibly even 10 weeks. So what are steps that we can take today to not just protect ourselves, our missions, and our staff fulfilling those missions, but how do we make sure that that we can do this in the case of any disaster going forward? So it's kind of this combination of basic business continuity planning, but also the how do we start to look at our missions a little bit differently. So welcome to April.
Yeah, just on our team, you know, I'm checking in with everyone on the team, and the consensus really is, man, it doesn't feel like I'm getting anything done, and I'm so tired at the end of the day. And you know, we track every minute of our time, and just personally, I'll have 5, 6, 7 hours tracked and be wiped and feel like I got 2 hours worth of work done. And so I think a huge piece of this that a lot of us have learned in disaster recovery is to be kind to yourself and be gentle, and you'll get through it, and you're probably going to be less productive, and that's okay. And we're just going to all accept that with one another and be kind and generous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people are starting to realize that, because people, the first 2 weeks were like, go, 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 because it's like this huge thing. And especially when working from home, if you haven't done it before, you get this sense of guilt that you have to be performing at a very high level. And the world has changed a little bit. So I think like having that opportunity to kind of take that step back and realize that we're all at a slightly different pace right now, that's a good thing. So with that, what does digitizing even mean? Like, how do we even start to break this into a context? But let's start with a couple of the basics in terms of what we're going to be discussing today. How do we basically take how you run your organization into this brave new world of physical separation, and not just running your organization from the inside, but running your organization from the internal and external management of your organization. And we're going to start with super basics. Can you even access your files on a regular basis? So that involves having kind of like a shared cloud drive that you're working from. If not, let us know. We actually have a really great technical partner that's actually going to be helping with this. So if your team is not on like a cloud drive at all, please let us know. We'll put you in touch with somebody that can help you.
And especially if you're working with vulnerable populations, you have to make sure that your cloud drive adheres to those regulations. So maybe you can just use Box or Dropbox, but you may not be able to. So just make sure you put that in your head when you're thinking about what system to go on to.
Exactly. And then can you easily communicate with your stakeholders? Like, do you know the login information for your donor database or whatever your email, contact, platform is? Can you continue to host board meetings? Like for a lot of us, that's actually pretty much a requirement for, as part of our bylaws, is that we have to have regular board meetings. So do you have the ability to have regular board meetings, whether it's through a platform like this or through Zoom, so that you're just adhering to, the nuts and bolts of even being a functioning organization? And then lastly, like, are you considered an essential service? Because that's going to dramatically change what you can digitize and what you can't digitize. And so if you are considered an essential service, a lot of what we're doing here will probably help you on the back end. But we may have to have follow-up conversations on what that would mean from an actual kind of program execution standpoint. Okay, so we just wanted to start with some super basic tools on how to run digital teams. So you're going to need collaboration tools, storage tools, and then visual communication tools. So collaboration tools, like we use Asana. We've been using it for a long time. We are looking at switching to another platform though. But basically, like, where is there a central area where you have kind of like your team's to-do lists? And if you work on projects, like, do you have a way to be tracking progress against those projects? So these are just some of like the favorite programs that I've used over the years. I've used a lot of them. It kind of just depends on like how you think and how your team thinks. So I'm not going to like advocate for one or over the other. But having a collaboration tool is going to be really helpful for you because it's going to help keep your team on track, and it's going to help you make sure things aren't falling through the cracks. Because even though like I have my to-do list that looks like this every single day, like my team can't necessarily see that. So I need to make sure that we're all on the same page at the same time. Also, centralized storage, Dropbox and Google Drive.
One question was someone was wondering what platform we're considering, and they're looking at ClickUp. So I don't know if you have one that you're planning on putting us in.
So I was looking at Basecamp and Monday.com. So I like Basecamp just from the standpoint of it allows me to separate the projects a little bit better. And I would say Slack is probably a good third there. Slack is really good if you have a larger team that needs fast communication on certain projects. I like Basecamp and Monday.com because we have a smaller team. And so the communication, our micro communication tools are taken care of elsewhere, but I just like how they visually track progress against projects. Trello is really good for people who, Trello is good for people who think like vertically on tasks, whereas like I feel like Monday is good for people who think more like a Gantt chart, more a traditional Gantt chart. And so those are the two I've been researching.
You mentioned micro communication. So on our team, and again, we've been running a virtual team for 8.5 years. And so we sort of have this hierarchy of communications. If it's a task, it goes into Asana, or it can get emailed. And then we use chat. So we're on Google Apps. So we use Google Chat for just the things that you would have a conversation about back and forth, but not tasks, because the tasks get lost in our chat chain. If something is extremely urgent, then we send a text message, but we do our best to keep work communications on email, Asana, and chat. And we only use text for emergencies because we're trying to create that work-life balance, which can be a lot harder when you work from home. So there's that. And the second question was, will it be recorded? Yes. And will we get slides after? Yes.
Always, always. We try to be as helpful as we can in terms of making sure that any tool and resource that we create for you will always be available for you afterwards. So anything you see here will show up to you in the next couple of days. And then other tools for running digital teams is visual communications. So Zoom, WebEx, Google Hangouts, these are really good just to have on an ongoing basis because we do our Monday huddles every single week through visual. It's been a really good way for us to just kind of connect with one another. See each other's dogs. Like one of our team members just adopted a dog last week, and like she's like now my puppy Zen time. So I require the dog on our calls now. Yes. But it also gives you just kind of that opportunity to have that visual check-in with one another. And this also might seem really silly, but we also use GIFs a lot in our short communication. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think anything that we can be doing to kind of streamline what we're doing, make it easier so that we all have access to the same things at the same time, but also making our communication styles a lot easier. Because we don't email each other for small things, because by the time you respond, somebody else could have had a thought. So we try to keep all of those separated out. But longer things do go into email, but short things we do into, the Google Chat options.
I want to take a minute to talk about collaborating using cloud-based systems like Dropbox. So we use Dropbox, and a couple things. It's really important to have very clear naming conventions, because the thing that makes sense in your brain about where it's saved or how it's named doesn't necessarily make sense to your colleagues. So at Visionality, we've got clients, we've got the thing you're working on, and we've got the modifier. So that could look like, client XYZ hyphen, and then it's, project proposal, and then underscore the date that it was last edited. So the idea is when you're working collaboratively remotely, you need to make sure you don't want to have to hunt and peck to try and find the right document. You just make things super clear, concise. We use archive folders all the time. So all the previous drafts of something go into an archive folder. So it's easy to find the most up-to-date piece of information. The other key thing, if you're using Dropbox, what you do on your computer reflects on everyone else's computer. So we do a lot of shared Dropbox folders with our clients, and about 5 times a year, someone on the board deletes the whole project file. And so we have an upgraded version of Dropbox that I really recommend. It allows you to restore files up to 365 days, which is really handy and helpful when your heart drops because the whole project file is gone. So 2 tips for working in Dropbox.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also even just a really good time for you to be going through all of your files anyways and organizing them. You have time on your hands right now. go through all of your files, make sure everything is in the appropriate folder, that it is named properly, that if basically you decided that you're going to retire to the Bahamas tomorrow morning, that somebody could pick up exactly where they needed to, because everything is so well organized. So take the time now. Like, I'm going through and organizing my email box right now. So this is the time to do those projects that you're like, oh, I should really do that, but you really don't want to because it's super painful. And because you're working from home, you can do it while you're drinking a glass of wine. No one's going to judge. So if you want to organize your file box while having a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, go for it. If that's the only, because I know that that's probably the only way I'm actually going to get through my email inbox at this rate. So tips for actually running your digital teams, moving on from that. To us, probably the most important part of our team's week is our Monday morning check-in. So 10 o'clock on Monday, every week, come hell or high water, we meet as a team and a couple things happen. One, we report out on everything that we did last week as for each client. So if you want to break that out for each project. So everybody that has a client, they report out on what they accomplished for that client last week. They then report out on what they're going to accomplish for that client this week. Then they say if they're going to be overwhelmed or not by the amount of work that's on their plate, because as a team can start to divvy it up. So those are three really big things that we just open the meeting with. It kind of centers everybody. It helps give everybody like really good marching orders on knowing where they need to get stuff done this week, but also where they can help during the week too. And I think that that's the biggest thing is more often than not, we as humans are generally afraid to ask for help, but we have just built that into our culture of like, hey, I have XYZ stuff this week. I'm not going to be able to get all this done because I know that these things are going to take so much time. Can I get help with these tasks? And everybody jumps in. And I think that that's like a good kind of cultural shift that we've worked towards is doing these Monday morning meetings, because I think it's really helped create more efficiencies because people know what to do during the week. They know what other people are doing during the week. And it gives them the opportunity of like, hey, I finished this early. Do you need help with this other project? So we make those a priority. There is probably nothing in this world. Actually, I think there's only been one instance where we have had to move that in, but that is the most important meeting that we have every week and everybody's there. So make them a priority. We also have started doing virtual shoot the breeze time because we used to have in-person meetings once a month because it's good to have FaceTime. But because we don't have that FaceTime opportunity as much as we used to, we've now started scheduling shoot the breeze time just to kind of get online, check in, say hi, don't talk about work. What are you doing? What happened this weekend? But with that, you know, that virtual shoot the breeze time, I think it's also really important to check in with the health of your team. So as part of our shoot time, we have also implemented self-care check-ins during the week as well. So a couple times a week, Emily and I will hop in and just be like, hey, are you sticking to your healthcare, your self-help, self-care goals for this week? So mine are drinking more water, because I'm really bad at doing that when, you know, things get really stressful. Making time to exercise, and I'm making time to meditate every single day. And so it's just that opportunity to check in to make sure people are taking care of themselves. And even if they're taking care of themselves during work hours, like I don't care if somebody needs to go for a walk during work hours. Like that's fine with me. Emily and I normally do our check-in meetings while we're walking the dog. So it's one of those things where it's like, we know that we're getting work done, but we also know that we're taking care of ourselves well, because the more your team feels that they're being taken care of and they're taking care of themselves, the more efficient and the more productive they're going to be in the long run.
Well, and what's interesting about working from home and just sort of the way we run Visionality, we expect our employees to generally work business hours, to generally be available, let's call it 7 to 6. However, they get to set their own schedules. And if I'm better in the mornings, so I work earlier in the mornings. Cecily's better in the afternoons, so that's when she does her work. And I see it later down. It's really important to respect business hours. And from my perspective, the health and well-being of my employees is my responsibility. And so now more than ever, it's really critical that as leaders in our companies, we are enforcing self-care because it's the only way we're going to get through this. And I do want my employees to walk their dogs 3 times a day, and I don't care if that takes them out of their seat, because it's the only way that we're going to get through this. So just know, if it's the first time that you're working from home, or you have colleagues or employees who are working from home, it's not going to look the same. It's not going to be 9 to 5 with a 1-hour lunch break. It's going to be broken up, and that's actually a much healthier way to live. And by the way, it's so great working from home, because you can like switch your laundry out during the day and walk your dog while you're doing meetings. So one thing that I'm hopeful about through all of this is that we'll actually become much more accustomed to working from home, and a lot more people can enjoy the work-life balance that we do at Visionality, because it's just real great.
And work-life balance is going to look very different in this situation than it is when the world is not chaotic. And I think that's the other thing I would really want to stress with teams that are working from home for the first time. Your productivity is not going to be where it was, and it's not because you're working from home. It's because you're under a lot of stress. You don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. You barely know what the next 3 hours are going to look like. And so recognize that the amount of stress that your team is under is very much the factor as to why they may or may not be super productive right now. And that's going to come in spits and spurts. There might be days where like you're rocking and rolling, and there might be days where you're like, I can barely focus today. And that is an absolutely normal part of traumatic stress response. And for anybody who tries to say that this is not a traumatic stress response situation, that's cool.
You're wrong.
But for 99.9% of us, it is. Even those of us who have been working from home, because even though we've been a remote team, we work with clients. Our clients are under insane amounts of stress and trying to make it work, and trying to make sure that they're keeping their doors open and their employees engaged. And there's a lot going on right now. So know that even though your team is working from home, they are not going to be as productive, and it's not because they're working from home. And lastly, having a short way of communication. Try to reduce the amount of emails that you guys are sending is really important. So having an ongoing chat is really good. So for us, we use Google Chat. We're on the Google platform. So we use Google Chat for team conversation, but we also use Google Chat for one-on-one conversation, because it doesn't make sense for my teammate to email me a question that I can answer in 2 seconds, because then it's going to clog up my email box that I'm going to already like emotionally struggling with, like having to empty out at some point. So the more that you can create short communication, the better. But then my team knows that, like, yeah, I do have a cell phone, but I don't carry our chat on my cell phone, and my team knows that, because that's what I do to create my work-life balance. But they do know that they can text message me if I'm not online, and it's something that definitely requires my attention.
The other thing to reduce email is, that's why you use a task management or collaboration tool like Asana, so that we can get less emails. And so all of those programs have commenting functions and assignment functions and subtext functions, so it can cut down on the email burden that we all share.
Yeah. So those are our tips for managing digital teams now that you've moved into the digital space as a team. But now we're also going to start to talk about how to consider like your organization's digital transformation. So how to actually look at your mission and fulfill your mission in a physically distant space. So can you even move your entire mission online? You may not be able to, and there's nothing wrong with that. How do you communicate this move and then continue to execute on that mission? So this is one of those things where you have to aim, then fire. So don't just communicate that you're going to be doing things online without knowing how on earth you're going to be doing it online. It's better to be silent for a little bit, get your plan in place, and then have a very clear kind of like sequence of events happening afterwards and going, yeah, we're moving everything online. And then nobody hears from you because you have no idea what you're doing. And then I also want you to consider whether or not there are programs that your organization simply cannot do now. Put them in a list, put them off to the side. We'll talk about those in a little bit. With the digital transformation, we also want you to start looking at what your funding strategy is. Can you be saving money right now? So Emily basically called everybody that we owe money to on a regular basis, called the landlord, called the credit card company, called cable, called everybody who has a recurring bill and said, can you give us a break or can we get a reduction? This is the time to be asking for those types of favors, especially if you're a nonprofit organization. If your landlord is willing to give you 50% off of rent for the next couple of months, take it. But ask, don't necessarily think that the landlords are just going to come forward and knock on your door and be like, hey, by the way, we'd like to pay less rent. They're not going to. but it does not hurt to make that call.
It was so simple. It was so easy. You're going to spend a lot of time on hold because everyone is making those calls. But by the time I got through to somebody, it was easy peasy peasy. I just said, my business is severely affected by COVID-19. Can I defer payments? Yes, ma'am. How long would you like them deferred for? And it was between 1 month and 3 months. So make those calls, make them by Friday. It was so painless, and it's just a really easy way to conserve cash right now. And a lot of times it's a deferred payment. You're still going to owe the money, and cash flow can be really tricky right now. So I would much rather defer a payment and hold on to a little bit of cash if I can, and figure out how to pay the money back later once we get through all this stuff.
Yeah, so think through what your payments are, your monthly payments are on a regular basis, and see if you can make some calls to get that reduced. Secondly, are there any programs that have specific funding tied to it, especially if you're working with a foundation or other kind of like major funding institution? Are they funding programs based on X, Y, Z? Can you call that funding institution to just be like, hey, we are not going to be able to fulfill based on our original scope of work or original proposal, but we think that we can continue to fulfill on these new ways. Would you still be willing to fund it? Because I know that for so many funding organizations, they have kind of like, they have reporting. So you're doing reporting based on what your proposal was. And if that's not matching up, then you get in funding trouble or whatever you want to call it. But this is the time to be proactive with your funders, whether they're major donors, individual major donors, whether they're foundations or other funding organizations. Just reach out and just be like, hey, we are unable to fulfill this funding based on these guidelines that we had set back when things were normal. We are going to try to do this type of work in this new way. Is that still okay? Because at the end of the day, it's like, again, it's just that proactive outreach of like, we are in this together. And so funders have to be flexible to what your needs are and what your capabilities are. And if you're at least being proactive and saying, we know that we're not going to be able to fulfill this the way that we had agreed to, but this is how we are still going to try to fulfill it under these new circumstances. I think it shows a lot more forward thinking versus just reactive thinking. So have some of those conversations with your donors or your funders. And then also just knowing what your runway is. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a presentation we're doing tomorrow. But what do you have in the bank? Like, how much time does that buy you? How much time does that buy you if you reduce your programming costs? How much does that buy you if you reduce your overhead and programming costs? Does it go longer? Knowing that you may have to like ramp up the number of people you're serving based on the type of organization you are, does that runway shorten? So start to have that conversation with your finance people as well as your board as to what your operating runway is, because that'll also help you figure out like what are your mission critical programs. So I kind of broke this how to digitize your mission into a 3-step process. And so step 1 is, what is your mission? Like, what is really, really your mission? And I'm not saying like the 3-sentence to 5-sentence, really flowery language that like our board comes up with at a retreat and it makes everybody feel good and we're all wearing like flower halos at the end of it and singing Kumbaya. But if you had to boil it down to 1 sentence, what is it? So I'm going to share Visionalities with you. So our old mission statement was, Visionality partners with organizations to transform yada, 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 yada. Boiled down, we change the way organizations succeed. We've had to change how we do that in the past 3 weeks. But at the end of the day, we decided, regardless of what it is that we're going to be doing to continue to open as a business, we are going to change the way organizations succeed. So that's why we're doing these types of webinars right now. It went from this kind of like very boutique consulting company where we worked very like hand in hand with the organizations that hired us for fundraising, marketing, communication solutions, really like high-end event planning as well, to, okay, how do we help organizations succeed based on the current set of circumstances that we're functioning in? So yeah, I'm going to be helping anybody with event, I can tell you with that one. But we can still help with some of those marketing, fundraising, communications platforms, but changing the way organizations succeed is where we are at in the world right now, because we don't know what's next. Organizations don't know what's happening next, but we can still do what success looks like. And the more organizations that we can help through this like time of very severe transition and probable downsizing in the industry, we are going to feel very successful. So we change the way organizations succeed, and we're changing in a very new way. Honestly, if you looked at the timeline of how hard, and I'm going to use Dina's favorite word right now, pivot. If you look at how hard we pivoted in the past 3 weeks, my last in-person meeting was March 11th. We got our Zoom account March 13th, and we hosted our first webinar March 17th with. So that was how fast we made our pivot. We weren't doing content before. We were doing really one-on-one work. But because we decided that we needed a partner and we needed to continue to help organizations, we thought that that was the best way for us to do this. So you're homework, write down your mission, but then like write down the one sentence of what your mission really means. Oh, I didn't move that one. Okay. That one jumped in when I was trying to change it at 1:57. Okay, so step 2, once you've boiled your mission down into that single sentence, the essence of your mission, can that be fulfilled via content, communication, or connection? So we got these here. And so this is basically like, what are your essential programs? What is the essence of your organization? How do you continue to fulfill on that, knowing that connection is different, communication is different, content is going to be different? And so the way I broke this out is I broke this out into kind of like a grid. So you have email, snail mail, web content, including social media, phone calls, those are going to be more important now than ever, and digital connections, such as what we're doing here. So based on your program, where in this matrix does your program fall? Does it require connection? Does it require communication? If it requires communication, what's the best form of communication? So once you start to lay out the components of your mission that you still can do, you're going to put it into this grid, and then you're going to start to strategize on every single one. So if I know that XYZ or X part of my mission needs to be taken care of through web content and social. An example that we're going to talk about is an organization that we work with. So they're going to be a very web content and social content heavy organization for the next few months. So what is the strategy there? So that's going to be that's going to go into the content strategy box, but what is then the strategy that happens after that? So this basically kind of gives you like the first step. Once you get your first step laid out, your second step is then to actually lay out comprehensive strategy for each of those areas. Also, forgive me, my dog's breaking through the house. And then step 3, can somebody help you fulfill other aspects of your mission that you may not be able to do right now? What partnerships can take place, or what partnerships that already be in place can be expanded? So when I think about this, what other types of organizations have like the logistics in place to execute on something, the staff in place to execute on something, or just the supplies to execute on something that my organization may not be able to do? But you can have, so it might be an organization that you've partnered with in the past for maybe small projects. Maybe that's an organization that can now help you fulfill a larger part of your mission, should you choose to try to continue to do that. So for instance, if you're partnering with an organization that has a fleet of cars, that could be a private or a public partnership. But if you need to get supplies from X area to Y area because you're seeing an expansion in services, you actually have access to another organization that can help fulfill that aspect of your mission. So start to really look at who your private partners are, who your public partners are, and see if there's opportunities for them to help you kind of help to fulfill some of these gaps that might be coming up. And whether that's based on you just not having the human power to execute it, the logistics power to execute it, or even just some of the supply, capability to execute it. But look at who your partners are and see if they can help you as well. And then we're going to do two examples today that I kind of just wanted to briefly cover. One of them is going to be client one and these are two of our clients. We're going to withhold their names, and really kind of like water down their missions. But client one is a professional organization. Their general mission is basically to improve and foster their council members through cooperation to better serve the public's needs based on the type of professionals that they are. So if their mission is to serve professionals, then they know they shouldn't be sending too much information to these people, to their members, because their members are already very well versed in these areas. So they don't need this sort of repetitive information. But what they can do is they can remind all of their members that they have each other as resources. And so we had them draft a letter from the board chair basically saying, hey, these are very difficult times for us, for all of us in this profession. However, we know that the best way to get our work done is through collaboration. If you don't know somebody, use the membership database. Here's the link to it. So to them, that was a very simple, like already in place item that could be easily executed for them. And then we just switched their homepage. Because again, as a professional organization, you're walking this fine line between making sure that your membership is engaged, but also making sure that you're being useful to your membership. And for this organization, the best way that they could be useful to their membership was to kind of get out of the way, remind them of the resources that they already had at their disposal versus trying to find 50 million, COVID-19 resource guides and trying to send it out, knowing that their professional organization's already on top of all that. So it was what was their lane within that, and what is that communication strategy within that. Also with that, we have been starting to host their board meetings because they don't have capacity to do it. And they just said, we don't want to learn how to do it either. Can you do it? So we're helping them host their future board meetings. And based on kind of like their seminar programming, we're basically determining based on when this may or may not let up, we're now determining whether or not their next seminar is going to be in person or done via virtual platforms such as this. So it's making those short-term plans of like, what did they need to do in that immediate term? And then what's that longer term of like, how do they continue to fulfill their mission through these seminars? But knowing that we're gonna have to be flexible on how we execute that. Next one is actually an art organization. This is a really fun one. So arts tend to get left behind very often in any type of disaster. But we thought that this would be a really great opportunity for the art organization to actually serve as a kind of a tool of peace and sanity right now. So we are working to develop a mailer for them with a letter from the board chair just saying, hey, we hope you're doing well. Our family's thinking of your family. But then we're actually going to be including downloaded coloring pages. It's an art organization. Why not provide coloring pages for people to do at home? And then in the cover letter, we're going to be telling people to go to this organization's website for more downloadable templates that they can color in. So whether, adult coloring is a thing, I'm going to admit that I have coloring books. It helps calm my mind, but kids like coloring too. So whether you have adult coloring book pages, kid coloring book pages, you are providing a resource to people in their homes, knowing that they can't leave. And also you have a very captive audience right now. So they know that the best in front of people isn't to try to do this huge email strategy because all of everyone's email boxes are full of stuff and they don't have anything productive to offer. So they're actually going for an old school mail strategy. They're going to be mailing something physical to people. We're going to be changing the outside of the envelope so that people want to open it. But that's going to then kickstart their digital content strategy of like, hey, stay tuned for more at-home activities, for more options to download and color, stay engaged. And this is turning from an organization that basically wants to promote creativity and learning and inspire passion and appreciation for the arts. They're still fulfilling their mission, by sending, but they're doing it in a completely different way. So instead of bringing people in to appreciate art, they are sending art to people to appreciate on their fridges. So I at least wanted to share those two items with you in terms of like how to start thinking through the components of your mission and what parts of your mission can be left behind and what parts of your mission can you really start to lean into in times like this.
Well,
and so
I want to encourage people, don't feel like you have to move a mountain. It's okay if it's just something little. With this arts organization, we're not developing a coloring book. We're not like doing a whole thing. We're sending a mailer with a couple coloring sheets, and it's something, and it's enough to show their stakeholders that they have pivoted, Dina's favorite word, but they're staying relevant, and it doesn't have to be this huge thing. It can just be a couple coloring pages. It can just be a little thing so that people don't forget about you until we come back out of this.
And if you are really worried about funding, ask your board to pay for it. Like, I can't, like, we're starting to price this out, but this is not going to be an expensive mailer. You know, it's going to be a couple sheets. Might be, you know, you're obviously not printing anything in color because you want people to color it in. So this to us is like a very easy opportunity to spend a little bit of money to get in front of your audience in a way that is meaningful, timely, and relevant. And I think that that's the hard part that sometimes we as fundraisers forget, is like, just being relevant is good and timely is good. Because there's not going to be a transaction ask in it whatsoever. They're not going to be asking for support. It's just, hey, we see you where you are. This is what we can do. And that professional organization is like, hey, we see you. We know where you are. This is how we can be useful to you right now, is by literally giving you this one tiny communication with one little link in it, because we know that you are all very well experted in all these other areas. So you don't need us for that. So it's figuring out how you can fulfill your mission, how you don't have to, like Emily said, you don't have to move mountains to do this. Even if you just find the smallest aspect of your mission that you can do really well right now, just to remain relevant and to remain in front of people. Once you come out the other side of this, and once donors come out the other side of this, they're going to actually thank and appreciate that you're thinking of their well-being during this time and their sanity during this time. People are under a lot of stress being at home full time, especially when they have kids or worried about loved ones. It's like the fact that you're trying to take some time to know that you are thinking in a non-financial way, I think is going to really speak volumes on the other side of this. And so that's the end of our presentation for the day. I at least wanted to open it back up to Emily and to see if there were any questions that came in, because I decided to just close out that chat box and Q&A box to see if there's any other topics came through that we could discuss kind of in an open format while we're still here.
Yeah, so my friend Linda, hi Linda, it's good to not see you. Linda asked, what about hiring displaced individuals for special short-term projects? Is that even possible with new laws around hiring consultants? The answer is I don't know. Dina might know. Just logistically at Visionality, we've always been really conservative about the difference between employees and independent contractors. So everyone is an employee. Pretty hard stop there, just because that is the most conservative, and I don't want to be wrong about it. So we go super conservative. But Dina, I wonder, is that something that you know the answer to?
Well,
okay.
So it's not something that I would give direct legal advice about, but I would encourage folks to mark their calendars for next week. We're going to be doing a second briefing with John Light, and that is one of the specific areas that he's going to delve into. If you were with us last week, it was largely about leave and the early analysis around some of the relief packages as it affected employee protections. And we've specifically asked him to start delving into this AB5 issue in light of the displaced workers. That's literally going to be going out later this afternoon. But in the meantime, I would suggest, Linda, John's been very generous with his time. And if you shoot him a quick email, one of his attorneys will get right back to you with probably more detail than you could imagine.
So I'd love to open it up to the attendees. Give us some challenges. Maybe you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you, but like, give us the thing that you're struggling to digitize, and like, let us help you figure it out. And maybe we can either workshop it, you know, the three of us on video, or if the rest of you have ideas, you can chat it in the chat box, but let us help you figure it out. And I think it's fun to, when you work out some of the tough ones, then you get your brain going on creative ways to do it. It's also always easier to solve someone else's problems than your own. So,
well, Emily and Christiana, I actually had a question for you guys, and this is not this was not a planted question. This is actually a question, and that is a lot of folks are really grappling with how to stay in close communication with their donors in meaningful and authentic ways. And so, have you seen examples with any of your clients of using some of these remote workplace tools to continue to enhance relationships with our donors and supporters during this time?
Well, give them a call. Personally, and it definitely depends, you each know your donors. If they are still working, they're probably really busy and feeling really crazy. And so it is probably not appropriate to send an email or to ask them to sit on another webinar. So maybe you send them a text and it's just, hey, I'm just thinking about you. Or you can call them and leave a message, because they probably won't answer, and just say, hey, I'm not calling for any reason. I just was thinking about you and I want to make sure you're doing okay. Call me if you need anything. If they aren't working, I still love phone calls. You could have virtual coffee, which is kind of fun, or virtual drinks in the evening. You could have lunch together over Zoom. So my suggestion, though, is to really think about what place that person could be right now, and tailor what you do with them to what you think their situation is right now.
And I think we're also going to have to start to just come to the realization that like any fundraising goals that people had set at the beginning of the year are probably like completely out the window right now. So stop worrying about transactions. And if your board chair and your executive director still think that there's a chance that you should be making a $300,000 push for the next couple of months, they probably out of their minds right now, at least for the vast majority of organizations. But start to turn this into relationship style fundraising instead of transactional fundraising. So really build those relationships. And I know that like for fundraisers, especially, like it's always this fine line between building a relationship, but also getting the transaction. But I think if you and your executive team can start to come to the understanding that like the fundraising numbers are going to look very different this year because of this, and you can start focusing on that relationship building versus the transaction part of it, I think it's going to give you a lot more creativity to actually just go, and I've seen this word so many times used in quotes, which blows my mind, go be human, which I don't think ever should require quotes, but it gives you it gives you the opportunity to just actually go build those meaningful relationships that we know our fundraisers want to be building with their donors. So I think it's going to be different for every donor, but I think that just use this as the opportunity to just check in, say hi, talk about what the organization's doing if they ask. But this really is that opportunity to kind of like reset some of the ways that you may have been doing fundraising before and really turn it into a relationship-based fundraising organization.
So ladies, I'm going to unmute Betsy Patterson. She has a question. Betsy?
She's still muted.
Oh. Hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Welcome, Betsy.
So I am with the League of Women Voters of Ventura County, and much of our activities involve face-to-face encounters. We register voters, we hold candidate forums, we do education about pros and cons. We have a lot of public activities that in the past have been done in public venues. And now we're struggling with how can we continue to register voters, to educate voters online and reach people that are not in our own membership. And I realize that there are other organizations we can collaborate with and ask them to ask their membership to register voters to get educated. But I'm just wondering if there are other methods that I am not thinking of. And right now we have a presence on Facebook, and that's about it as far as social media.
Okay. I think that's good though. I think actually Facebook is a really good option for you. Something that I have seen our local library doing is they'll still do forums and readings through their Facebook page. So they still have kind of like it, so it feels like in person, but it's being presented on that platform live so that you can have those discussions, have those engagement opportunities. You know, if you're bringing in candidates or speakers, you can basically set up that speaker to be doing, so you don't have to do a webinar, which you can if you want to, but it's still just kind of those opportunities to use either Facebook or Zoom like this so that you are able to host a panel discussion that you would that you probably normally host on a regular basis with your constituency, but also you can start to encourage them to like forward the email or invite your friends. Or I think a lot of nonprofits will start spending a lot more money on Facebook advertising because of this. And I think that that's not a bad thing.
Yeah,
you want to add, Emily?
Yeah, so we actually just took my Rotary meeting virtual, and I see this maybe a little bit similarly. And so if you've ever been to a Rotary, it's over lunch. Mine is over lunch, and there's different components to the meeting, one of which is a presentation, and then networking and connection before and after. And so we've done now 2 Rotary meetings using Zoom. We still have a presenter, and then we haven't done it yet, but our intention is after the meeting to actually use the breakout room function in Zoom, which allows people to go from the big group to either predefined groups, so you can assign 2 or 4 or 6 people to a different room, or it can do a random where it just like Zoom decides randomly who goes into a room. And so what we're really pushing our clients to do is find a way to recreate each aspect of the event. So if you would have had a breakfast event, have it during breakfast and put in the invite, like, come have breakfast with us, you know, have a cup of coffee, cook some eggs, and then mirror each of those components so that it can be as realistic as possible. And I've been watching these kinds of forum things over dinner. And so think too, you know, we're all kind of getting tired maybe of our family. And so having some entertainment or some stimulation during a meal could be kind of cool. I haven't hosted one yet for a client, but we're watching them at home. So play around with it, because I don't know, it sounds cool to me. I would watch it. And thank you for your work. Everyone vote. Yay.
Everyone register if you haven't done so.
Yeah, I have a question here. Linda is asking, just during this webinar, I've had 16 texts, 3 calls, a bunch of emails, and over a dozen chat messages. How do I get this going to one place, or should it?
I think it's totally fair to put boundaries in place, and there is nothing wrong with that. Like I do not carry the chat function of Google on my phone whatsoever, because I know that when I step away from my computer, I need that brain space. But I've also told my team that if it is important, they can text me. So I think it's just, there's nothing wrong with creating boundaries. I don't think it makes you a mean person, but I think it's also good for teams to just have base boundaries to be from, because this. And I think that that's probably going to be really helpful to, like, either if you're not in that leadership position, work with your leadership to set those in place. Because yeah, if not, they're going to go crazy. We had a client try to call one of our consultants at 10 o'clock at night. We just had to lay that out of, like, that's not an okay behavior and we're not going to play into that at all. But I think because if you haven't done it before, you don't know how to do it. And so just lay the boundaries out, and it's not bad. It's not like you're trying to create like boxes and you're trying to say like, stay away, but if you're just trying to sufficient forms of communication are this, then this, then this.
Well, and if any of you have my cell phone number and have gotten to my voicemail, first of all, my phone is on silent almost all the time because it is so intense and it shakes me up every time I hear the ding. And so I recognize that consistent dinging was triggering to me. And so I put everything on silent, and it will be there. My phone will be there when we get done, and then I will triage things. Number 2, if you have gotten to my voicemail says, do not leave me a voicemail. If this is personal, text me. And if this is professional, call me back on my work phone number, and here's the phone number. And that helps me keep things segregated, work-life balance. I want my family to text me. I do not need clients to text me. And so just recognize whatever you're comfortable with. Some of our employees do want the clients to text them because they want to have that kind of relationship. We don't advise that, and it's really up to what each person is comfortable with. So just recognize for yourself, whatever you decide is appropriate for you is totally okay.
So I'm going to try to catch us up here. I've got a couple questions from Jacqueline, and I'm going to shoot back over a question from Linda. The first one is, what's your advice on adjusting service rates going from personal to virtual platform?
I want more clarification. So maybe
yeah.
Can we,
Like what you're charging rates, or?
Jacqueline, I'm gonna unmute you, so tell us more about what you mean. Oh, you're still there.
Great, thank you. So I'm with a nonprofit, and we provide one-to-one and small group services to the disability community. And so we have actually, similar to you, launched a virtual platform, but we are still trying to think about how do we adjust our rates to do that, to have some revenue coming in versus nothing.
Yeah, we are a business. Obviously, every nonprofit is a business. You have to be able to afford to run your business. My recommendation is, if you can afford to reduce things, do it. Or you could set up a like a scholarship request. So make the communication, if you're able to pay full freight, we really appreciate it and thank you for that. And if you are able, that enables us to provide reduced fee services to those who aren't able to pull it right now. So we've kind of adopted a give what you can model, and if you're able to, thank you, because that means we can do all these other things. And if you're not able, that's okay, and we'll find a way to help you. Does that help answer your question? And Christiana and Dina, what do you guys think?
Well, we've had a lot of conversations about this time right now and our role as conveners and investors in the nonprofit leadership space, and everyone having a component of earned income as a part of their revenue model. Mm-hmm. And so one of the pieces of advice that we got earlier this week was to actually articulate that, even if you know that your constituency base is going to appreciate a free webinar or a very, very low cost webinar or activity, to still have in your mind the full cost of implementing that activity, even if it is subsidized, and communicating that so that people have a reality check on what it's taking for all of us to survive during this time.
Yeah, but I would say that there is absolutely nothing wrong that as a business owner or as a nonprofit providing services, there is nothing wrong for you to say, we need those that can pay for this to pay for this, because this is the way that we get through the other side to continue to do this afterwards. Money doesn't grow on trees, and we can't do everything for free. We'd live in a completely different society if that was the case. But, you know, at the end of the day, people invest in nonprofits because they believe in the work of the nonprofit for the long term, not just the short term. So whether it's a for-profit business or a nonprofit business, both are businesses. They're both run very similarly. And you're trying to make sure that you have enough investment to get through this right now.
Right. Thank you, ladies.
Absolutely.
Really just trying to help cover, you know, we put in a lot of hours on content, and just trying to help people earn something.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I want to shoot back over. Linda asked the question about pivoting a face-to-face event for June 4th. And decided to pivot for many reasons, and it turned into a virtual event. Any clue about how to predict realistic goals and costs for an event of this type?
I think it depends on the event type. You know, to be totally honest, are you doing a luncheon that's getting translated? Are you doing a music event that's getting translated? So I think it really depends on what the event is. But also, like, the sooner that you can map out the components of doing the digital version of that event, I think the better it is. I think people are being very open to knowing that events are being canceled or postponed, or, you know, I was supposed to go to a luncheon a couple weeks ago that got canceled, but they proactively kept the cost of my ticket because they're like, we couldn't cancel without just absolutely hemorrhaging money. And I absolutely respected that. And the way that they worded it made so much sense to me. And so I think it's going to really depend on your event, and you might need to scale the event down a little bit or just scale it differently. But then start to cost that out now and then also make sure that you're calling your vendors as fast as possible to get whatever you can back from them, but also knowing that there are small businesses that are trying to stay afloat in this as well.
So Linda, I unmuted you. So give us some more details.
So our event was supposed to be for June 4th. We've already dealt with the vendors that we had already signed contracts with. My question is really more about how do we craft a realistic fundraising goal as well as kind of figuring out the cost piece. We've got a consultant that's going to do this for us, and they're putting a proposal together, but I have no history of doing a virtual event, so I don't know how to compare that. And I have no idea, maybe nobody does, realistically what we're going to raise. We last year raised 100,000, so that's sort of where we are. Do I cut that in half? Do I cut it into fours to get some, perspective?
I think it's good to figure out like who you're going to be able to line up for gifts ahead of time. Like that's just kind of like the basic math of it, right? Like who do you know that you're going to be able to get commitments from ahead of the event? And then based on the past 2 major digital fundraising events that I have pushed really, really, really hard to have participation numbers instead of dollars raised. Because to me, that was a bigger indicator that people were actually interested, and it gave us an opportunity for greater follow-up versus like, oh, we raised $50,000, but it's like, depending on the size of your organization, of course you can raise $50,000, based on who your donor pool is. And that number is different based on the size of your organization. But I think instead of focusing on the dollars raised, try to focus on the number of people participating. Because to me, that's when you look at digital social media metrics, engagement metrics are like honey money. Like that's how you're moving the needle on whatever it is that you're doing. So dollars raised, we know that we can finagle things to make it look like we raised $100,000. But if we can get 450 people to participate, that's way cooler, because that's names, those are email addresses, that's follow-up, those are people in your database that may not have been there otherwise. So I would consider maybe shifting the metric.
I like the way you're thinking about it. What about when those events were done that you participated in? Was it more expensive to do? Or less expensive to do? Any clue on that?
It should be way less expensive.
It was less.
Because you're not paying a venue, you're not paying for food, you're not paying speakers, you're not paying AV. So I would predict it would be significantly less expensive. And if it's not, we should have a conversation.
Yeah,
well,
but
I
be
think
willing to up your digital marketing dollars too. I think that's the other part that gets really overlooked, especially in nonprofit fundraising generally, or nonprofit digital strategy, is really make sure that you are spending a good amount of money on your Facebook advertising, your digital advertising. Like make sure that the advertising is there, because the world of organic is gone when it comes to content. So you have to pay to play, and if you want to pay to get participation, you're going to have to pay for that.
Yeah, I get that. I think the piece that I am trying to figure out is we're going to do a video as a way to showcase, who our customers are, who our clients are, who our vendors are, etc. And so I have no idea what those cost, but I guess I'll find out when she proposes her pitch. Thank you, though.
Yeah.
This is great, guys.
In our past clients who have done like 5-7 minute videos, it's been like $5,000 to $7,000. So
thanks. Okay.
Yes. So think in that ballpark, and the way to get that down is to have the videographer only have to show up one place one time.
Yep.
So you're gathering all of the stories and putting them all in one place. Oh, except never mind, because we can't all be in the same place. Never mind. Sorry. I forgot.
It might be even cheaper then, because you're working off of B-roll.
Yeah, we had the same experience, Linda, with it was face-to-face, but what we found helped a lot was to actually have a volunteer do the storyboard, the scheduling, the herding of the cats, the transitions, all of the stuff that would just chew up the videographer's time. And then that really allowed him to focus in on the videography piece that was the expertise we didn't have.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a question from Jacqueline about virtual platforms that are screen interactive between presenter and viewer, using virtual tic-tac-toe as an easy example. Any thoughts, any familiarity with a platform of that nature?
The live polling one, I think, is an interesting interactive one. I can't remember the name of that off the top of our head, but we did this event a couple months ago where we would present questions, and then people would get onto their mobile devices and present kind of answers or their answer to the question and then visualize. I think that could probably be remodeled in a way based on what you're actually trying to accomplish. But yeah, I think it's like, A, what are you trying to accomplish through the end of it? And B, like, then trying to find whichever the platform is for that. Do you want to add on to that, Emily, or?
Yeah, in Zoom, there's a way to do polls. So that's an option. If you're, I don't have any solutions if you're like thinking where like you code draw on on the same.
I would like to chime in there.
Oh, Brianne.
Yeah. So
Brianne's
Zoom
our tech
actually
expert.
does have that feature. On Zoom, you have a whiteboard feature and you have co-annotation. So anybody you give control to, they have the ability to annotate your screen. Like
So, you want to show us?
Yeah, since Christiana is sharing her screen right now.
Oh.
Yeah, see, she's drawing on it, and I can also, if I can find the right setting, it might not be in the webinar, it might only be in the meeting one.
Sure.
But
well, that was fun.
There,
cool.
Anybody you
Brianne?
set settings to, they can all draw on the screen. They can do the whiteboard screen feature.
Wow,
Cool.
thank you, Brianne.
Thanks. Okay, Meg, you have been so patient with us. Thank you very much. So I'm going to unmute you and let us know how we can help. Got it. Unmute. Oh, Meg, I think.
Is Meg still with us?
Maybe not. Maybe not.
I did not have questions. Sorry. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
okay. No problem. Just wanted to make sure we gotcha.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have a few more minutes for a few more questions for the Visionality team. If folks want to raise their hand or type their question into the Q&A. Linda has a question. Will you do a high-level Zoom webinar?
Are you, Linda, let me unmute you. Okay, tell me what you mean by that. Like, yeah, tell me what you mean by that.
Cal State Channel Islands just did a Zoom webinar for mature learners. I think that's called Old People. And it was the very basics, and it was good to participate in that, not just because I'm old, but because I wanted to see how other people were interacting with it. It was really a great learning tool for me to be able to see all the things that people were asking who may not have grown up with the technology. But there's many more things that Zoom does, and I'm not finding resources like the whiteboard feature or some of those things. And so I'm wondering if we can do some training, higher level training on it, not just how to be a participant, but I need to become a Zoom master, and I have about, probably 7 days. Just kidding. And so how do we get from where we are as facilitators of information to being Zoom masters or masters of other programs that we need?
Well, we'll have to put Brianne on the spot to see if she's willing to lead a webinar. It sounds like a pretty good idea. We do have a Zoom users guide on our website. I can't remember though if it goes into like all those pretty intricate features. The other piece too, this is something that Visionality is doing now. If you don't want to become a Zoom master, you can reach out to us, and we're doing all the, Brianne is doing all the magical stuff on the back end. And so that's what we've done with Dina. Dina decided she would prefer not to become a Zoom master. And so her job is to show up and be the subject matter expert and do what she's very best at. And then our job, Brianne's job, is to run the back end and make sure things happen. So, so check out our user guide, and
then we'll see if we have bandwidth to do one. Yeah, because I heard that in our last webinar too. We were doing one of those.
Sure.
Well, and I prefer to learn in an interactive fashion anyway, so I really get how that would be preferable to watching a video or reading a website.
So, and
Sorry, Brianne.
I'm just going to repeat this one more time, that the webinar is being recorded, and we'll definitely include a link to the user guide on the Visionality website. There's also a really great COVID toolkit available on Visionality's website. Strongly encourage you to check their page out for further information and resources. Any last questions? Looks like we've got folks starting to drop off and get on with their day. Linda Fisher-Helton, I think you're awesome too.
She is awesome.
Meg Phelps is reminding everyone that there's a lot of tutorials available on Zoom's website. I've also seen a fair number of them on YouTube. And then I will also remind those of you who are CNL members, you have access to LinkedIn Learning on demand, if that is your cup of tea. I know not everybody prefers to learn that way, but there are some on-demand webinars, content that you can tap into for some of these more feature overview of the platforms.
And if you're not a CNL member, man, what are you doing? Again, I'm a business owner. This has to make business sense for me. And the best way to retain your workers is to treat them well and to help them better themselves. And so just simply dollars to cents, like CNL is some of the best money I spend every month. So there you go, little plug for CNL. All right, any other questions? I don't see anything. Well, thank you all for joining us. We are having another webinar on Friday. So maybe we'll see you again, and stay safe and don't touch your face.
Yes, no doubt. Thank you so much to the Visionality team for joining us and being an exemplary partner to the Center for Nonprofit Leadership. It'll take a little bit of time for Zoom to process the recording, but we'll make that available after it's available. And I would also, just a blanket open invitation to ask for the help that you need. Drop us an email, reply to the many surveys that we've been administering, seeking further input in what you would find valuable. And again, take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, folks.
Thanks, Scooter.